Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you this morning to Epiphany Station if you are a guest. Yeah, I'm on. I'm just quiet and subdued individual. If you are a guest with us at Epiphany Station or you don't, how dare you? If you don't know who I am, my name is Matty. I'm the lead pastor here at Epiphany Station, and I want to let you know of something coming up that is the biggest date on Epiphany Station's calendar for the entire year, and that is 2 weeks from today. We will be celebrating Easter here. Easter is an amazing opportunity for us as a church to do what we're here to do. As Tori shared this morning, we're here to love God and love people, period. And the way that we've been called to do that is to embrace thousands and thousands of outsiders, people who don't feel like they belong, don't feel like they can go to a church. And Easter is an amazing opportunity to do something different and do something more. It's why we've added a third worship experience. So at 8 a.m., 9:30, and 11, we can invite people in here, and we have room for over 750 people to come and experience worship with us that Easter. Now, to be able to do that and to do that well, I want to ask you, if you are either just a first-time guest with us or you call Epiphany Station home, I want to ask you to do one of three things for me. The first would be plan on bringing somebody with you to Easter. Don't invite them to come, bring them, like physically drag them kicking and screaming to come, because what we found is most people will try once. They will trust you once, and Easter will be a great chance to do that, and we promise not to embarrass you. We promise to make your friends not think that you're weird. We promise to show them what it means to be passionately expressive about our celebration of what God did at the original Easter. So please bring someone. Second, we want you to think about planning on serving. It takes a lot of people to do what we do, to make Epiphany what it is. And really, Epiphany Station is not a place where people call it home because of me or of Wyatt or of the music or the treats. It might be a little bit about the treats, but mostly it's about the loads of people who are willing to serve one another, to be here to show people that they're welcome and accepted and loved, to be a part of our family. So I want to invite you to do this, to plan to bring someone to one of the worship experiences and plan to serve at another one. And you can go to the welcome station, see Kelly, our manager of operations. She'll get you signed up for all sorts of fun stuff. And the third thing that I want you to plan on doing, and this is going to seem a little bit peculiar, but the third thing I want you to plan on doing, this is for some of you, I want you to plan for Easter not to be here. I want you to plan not to come to Epiphany Station for Easter, and instead I want you to plan to do something quite drastic and radical. We are at our heart a church planting church, and our daughter church, Grand City Station, will be moving into their brand new permanent space for the first time on Easter Sunday, and I want you to go. I want those of you who can, those of you who have the opportunity, those who aren't already suckered into serving, to go and support Grand City Station in their new launch, in their new space inside the Columbia Mall, to show that we actually care about the growth of the church more than we care about attendance numbers here. So if you're willing to do that, I would love you to go. I'd love you to think of friends you have in Grand Forks that don't have a church and bring them. Go to Grand City and serve alongside them and do all the things you might do here, but go do them there for Easter to give them a great supported launch. Now, today, aside from Easter, today we get to have a conversation about our teaching series, from our teaching series called Happy Money, in which we're seeking to really advance out of this idea that money is a burden, or at best it's a necessary evil. Instead, it can bring joy, and it can be a blessing, and it can be good for our lives as we experience it. We launched last week, and if you were unable to see that, on our website, epiphanystation.com, you can see as we talked about and launched the series talking about earning and why we earn money and why we should want to earn lots and lots of money for an intended purpose. But we're going to go from that controversial conversation to one that is downright contentious. Today we're going to talk about debt. We're going to talk about financial, monetary debt. Debt's one of those interesting things that no one likes, and nobody would ever say that's a choice that they would make. But it's also one that we tend to ignore in conversation and sometimes just accept being a part of life. We find it distasteful, but it's really easy to overlook. It's become part of our common vocabulary of life. Culturally, it is the norm to be in some sort of debt. And really what I want us to do today is pause for just a minute and ask ourselves the question, is it acceptable? Is it good? Is it okay? Is it something that we should just appropriate into our lives, or is it something that should not be accepted? Now, you and I are growing up, we're raising kids, we are living out retirement, we are working, we are playing in an ever-changing culture. A culture that brings some very strange things with it as you look to the next generation and see what they're doing. But with it comes things like social media. With it comes things like what seems to be a new, more profound distaste and hatred for racism and sexism and abuse. And there are some really good new cultural norms that are being adapted into our society. But some new cultural norms are not so good. Some new cultural norms are the reason that the millennials get blamed for so many things and the whole generation is written off as morons. There are some things that are becoming culturally normal that we need to know if we should accept them as such. And is debt one of those? Is debt something that is now just a part of how we live life? And if it is it really that bad? Is it the new normal, or is it a newly realized threat? Debt has become so normal to our vocabulary and so normal to our culture that it probably wouldn't surprise you to hear that yesterday, I think it was Friday actually, we topped our national debt to the largest amount it's ever been, at $21 trillion. Now, I say that number to you, and no one's like, we're in trouble. No, we just go, meh, that sucks. And we continue on with our life. It probably wouldn't surprise you to know that the average American holds $137,000 of debt. It probably wouldn't even surprise you to hear the statistics and the research that's been done about how much debt affects and harms us. Be it physically and the stress that it causes that leads to increased blood pressure in study groups causing more heart attacks and strokes. How it leads to mental and social and behavioral disorders. Probably wouldn't surprise you that those who are in debt tend to be socially and economically compressed and crippled into that demographic and bracket for their entire lives, trickling that down to their kids and their legacy. Probably wouldn't surprise you for you to tell me that one of the greatest, if not the greatest argument in married couples and in families is money. And how debt has the ability and the effect to cause divorces and separate siblings and parents. And it causes all of this damage and destruction, yet it seems like it's just the norm. It's just this thing that we've come to accept as what we have to do to get through life. Now, even if those things that I've just mentioned aren't enough, if that's not enough to get us to want to do something, to be motivated out of choosing debt, we need to be willing to accept that if we as a people here are here this morning because we want to love God and we want to love people, we need to accept some of the things that might be said by God about why it's not just about physical, not just financial, not just relational, that there are more reasons for us to accept, to reject this new cultural norm. In the same way that when you get an email from a Nigerian prince who wants to give you diamonds, God wants you to think about those offers of debt that come in nice envelopes with a pre-approved card. In the same way that you wouldn't be willing to walk into a fox's den for dinner if you were a chicken, you wouldn't accept the commercial that is telling you that you can earn this much, you can borrow this much, and it's risk-free. That we would understand that debt is actually a thief at the door that's wrecking lives. So the rest of our time, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about this new necessary, this new normal, or this new threat. Now, whether you think it's a necessary new normal or a necessary new threat, the problem with both those mentalities is it's not new. Debt isn't a new thing. It's recorded throughout history. In fact, if you go to the second book of the Bible, Exodus, thousands of years ago, you will see reference made to debt in Exodus 22, in which God, when he first calls a bunch of people together to, all right, you're going to be my new people. This is how we're going to do life differently. This is how we're going to do life better. He makes reference to say, and debt will not be a part of this community. Making money off of other people will not be part of our community. God is concerned with debt and seems to think throughout his entire book, we should be concerned with it too. But it begs a question, why is it so important to God? Why could it possibly have such detriment that God makes it command-worthy? That he calls it out over and over and over again. Don't do it. It's not part of you. It's not what you should do. Surely it has more effect on us than just our sleep or our relationships. Can it be so bad that it's worth not doing? Because when we do go into debt, we can get things we can't afford. We can advance ourselves intellectually and physically. We can do all sorts of marvelous things that help us to make money off of other people's debt. can be leveraged, it can be used. So why does God say, in my community, no? It has to be important. God says that it is so bad, too bad to be optional. That if you were to condense down what God has called us to do, to how to live our lives, debt must be a threat to that. Debt must pose a threat to the very essence of the mission and vision that God has of people who want to follow him, a threat to them being able to do that. The mission of God's person, God's man, God's woman, is that they would grow ever more and more in a love for God and a love for people. It's very simply put. So how is it that debt threatens that, hinders that, destroys that? Are we going to find enough motivation that we would rip it out of our lives for the sake of what God has called us to do? I want to talk about that. We're going to dig through the Bible. If you don't have one, don't worry, the text will be on the screen behind me. But we're going to dig through and see how our love for God and our love for people is diminished when we accept debt as an option. So let's talk about screwing up our love for people, because we're all really good at that. Starting off in Proverbs 22, verse 7. It says, just as the rich rule the poor, so the borrower is servant to the lender. Now, other versions and other descriptions of how it is translated would say slave to the lender or under the power of, or they become subjugated to. They have been lessened in their worth and value because of becoming a borrower, because of becoming a lender. What happens when we enter in a relationship with any one person ever is that we have decided to either diminish ourselves under their leadership, under their mastery, or we have decided to put someone else under our subjugation. Now, if you were here last week as we talked about why we earn money in the first place, it was to care for, to provide, to protect those in our world. So something gets distorted and twisted when all of a sudden we're able to use our money to earn more money from people. Or because we don't have enough money, we're willing to put ourselves under them. Slave, servant to them. What happens in debt is there is a value shift, a personal worth shift. Now, we happen to live in a culture that has made amazing strides over the last couple of centuries and especially over the last few decades to understand and come to grips with the truth that no one person is more valuable than another. No gender, no race is more valuable than another. We've made strides. We've not trodden it out. It's not extinguished. But steps have been made, enough to say, enough to accept in Western culture, slavery's bad. Slavery's bad. We shouldn't do it. We shouldn't be willing to be step into it. We are worth more than that. People are worth more than that. Yet somehow we have ignored, or under the radar has flown, this idea that it's okay for us to be slavery to someone else's money. That we can now work the rest of our lives to give somebody back what we once borrowed. And God is saying here quite clearly that a man of God, that a woman of God, that is not acceptable. That is a direct affront to the idea of loving God and loving people. To make someone less than they are, to allow them to make that decision or to put ourselves underneath another is not acceptable if we want to love people well, because it changes the reality. It changes the reality of an equal people group, that all are worthwhile and all are worthy of love and affection. Now, if that's not enough to give us motivation not to go into debt, wait, there's more. And what's more and what comes from it, I think, is a bit more subtle. It's not something that you could ever write on a piece of paper. It's not numbers and figures you could jot down. It's something that happens to us that's a lot more practical and a lot more ugly. Something that comes from being in debt to another person that rears its ugly head. You might know what I'm talking about, but when you owe somebody money or they owe it to you, you look at them differently. You view them differently. You value them differently. That friend is now a landlord. That person you see on the street is your banker. And friends and family no longer hold that place in your life of just pure love and affection. There is always that dividing money between you. And it can cause us to act incredibly weird.
Hey Penny, how was work?
Great. I hope I'm a waitress at the Cheesecake Factory for my whole life.
Was that sarcasm?
No.
Was that sarcasm?
Yes.
Was that sarcasm? Stop it! Penny, you appear to have a package here.
Oh, thanks. Must be the beret I ordered a couple months ago. It was back ordered.
Did you know the beret is an example of a piece of women's fashion adapted from male military uniforms? Another fascinating example is the epaulette.
He's not lying. He does find that fascinating.
Okay, look, whatever. It's not like I'm running up and down the streets just buying myself berets. I bought one like a month ago, and it was back ordered. And look, it finally arrived, all right?
All right.
Oh my God, will you just get off my case?
Weird.
Oh, good. That was an unusual interaction. I wasn't sure.
Now, the best case scenario of how it makes us act weird, how debt to another person makes us act weird, is it brings out of us a difference of relationship. If we look at people through a different lens, whether we want to or not, at worst, it ruins relationships. Stories of children who no longer talk to their parents, siblings who've fallen out over money. Because at worst, it has the ability to repurpose us from our first mission, from our major goal when it comes to how we treat people. Debt distracts us. We have a purpose when it comes to people. One purpose, one job. In Romans 13:8, it says, "Owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love one another. If you love your neighbor, you will fulfill the requirements of God's law." Our obligation in loving people is to love people. Owing them money, them owing us money puts hindrance on that, puts restriction on that, so that parent, that banker, that lender is no longer just a person you need to love, it's a person you have to pay. It's not just a person that you now have to love and are called to love, it's a person that owes you money. And it changes us. We are not here to make money off other people. We're not even here to get stuff. We're not here to advance faster through life. We're here to love people. And the moment that we say we'll enter into debt to get these other things, we're communicating. My love for people is now less. It's now less important than whatever I'm pursuing up here. And I'm willing to put that person down there in this new category, this new box, instead of placing them on a pedestal of love in my life. We'll do it to friends, we'll do it to family, we'll do it to strangers. And it ruins our ability to see them through the eyes we're supposed to see them. Someone desperately in need of love, not in need of our money. God says if you're going to love people, he says simply, there will be no debt amongst you. You will not lend, you will not borrow. Now, how does it shift then when we talk about loving God? How does debt affect our love for God? Well, I'm really glad that you're asking that question, because really this is pointed at those who have decided to follow God, to love God with their lives. If you're in that boat, we have to ask ourselves a really hard question. Can we love God and choose debt? Can we love God, trust God, serve God, and then still choose to go into debt? Seemingly, nope. Seemingly, those two things are mutually exclusive. Seemingly, if we were going to trust in this provisional, good, giving God, we would not need to depend on the money of another that would bring extortion out of us. God calls us to trust him in all things, without circumstantial exception. To trust him, to serve him, to give to him. Now, this can be very easy conversation for us all now to sit here like, all right, now I'm going to get it for both barrels for the next 12 minutes. We can feel condemned when it comes to debt, because if you're an average person, you're in debt. Now, we've all arrived there in different situations. We've arrived there because we didn't know this. We arrived there because we didn't think we had an option. But we could spend our entire lives thinking about how we would do it differently and how we would relive this, or we could consider what we would do now. This condemnation was not supposed to be. Instead, are we supposed to be convicted to change course? Are we supposed to now correct things and do from now what will be easier for us to love God and love people and trust in him by shifting back towards his guidance? Loving God and being obedient to God are never two things that exist on their own. They come into contact together with the centrality of trust. That if we love him, we will obey him. And if we obey him, we're showing love to him. So we have to ask ourselves, now what will we do? Will we be willing to take next steps and plan actions and make movements in our change in our philosophy and our theories towards what debt means in our lives. Now, every week we have at Epiphany Station these things called next steps, these things that are to challenge us to do things differently. That if reading God's word and worshiping together doesn't change us somehow, that it was a worthless and useless weekend. The worst hobby you could ever have. But instead, we get this opportunity to be changed, to be transformed, and your next steps this week are going to be that. Your first one is to change your mentality and to see that choosing debt is mutually exclusive from loving God. That moving forward, you are challenged in your first next step to simply love God. Elsewhere in Proverbs in chapter 3, we're given this straight command for those of us who are all about this LGLP thing. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. Honor the Lord with all your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Then he will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. Now, you probably don't have barns and vats. But God's offer for you to do this differently is to trust in him in all things. That the understanding and wisdom that you have might not be perfect. And if we were to look at the results of life, you might agree that they're not quite perfect. That it could have been done differently, that we could be in a different situation. Now, we can stick to our plans, and you can go as you will. That's completely up to you. God simply offers this ability for us to choose to trust. And with trust comes promise. That we would trust him in all things, that he would be good about that. That he would not abandon us, that he would not take us for a ride, that he would give to us even money that we need. That he would become the lender, he would become the provider, the only one that we would be willing to subjugate ourselves to and make master. Look, this debt thing's not working. It's not working on a national or international level. Countries going bankrupt. It's not working on a personal level. So we have to be willing to decide as a people to do something very different. And God offers that different. Loving him is different. And if we would decide to do that, life will be different. The second next step is to see that loving people and going into debt under them, loving people and putting them in debt, is mutually exclusive. And your next step is simply to love people. Romans 13:8 says, you are obligated to love. That is the reason that you are here. It's why we're not hermits. It's why we're around people. The sun is out. We can now go outside. We can now come into contact with the rest of the human race. And your job when you come into touch with them is to love them. Only that. So remove everything else. Remove all financial obligations. Remove all grudges. Remove all hurts so that you can look at them how you need to. They're not cattle for you to earn from. And they're not worthy of being depended on. If we're going to love people, we need to serve them instead of scamming them. We need to love them instead of leveraging them. We need to pay them instead of just promising them. And we need to treat them family instead of treating them like the IRS. If Christians and believers are going to do this thing, then we need to change our relationships with people and not allow money to become a thing in between us. That we would be marked by our obligations in all relationships. That we would take people once again and place them up here as the reason we earn money is to support and provide for them. Not to make money and to put money above their importance. I truly believe that in our day and age, which is so fascinated and obsessed with finances and money and resources and toys and stuff, one of the loudest and most tangible expressions of love is money. It has become one of those ways in which we communicate to our kids, to our friends, to strangers that we love them. Because they can hear it. They can hear it. It's an action. It's not just words. It's an action of saying, what I have earned, what is rightfully mine, I will freely give. To be able to do that shows them that they're more important than their money. More important than your money. Now, the third next step, and this is where the rubber really meets the road, is to run from debt. Is to run from debt. And I don't mean like run from the collectors and change your name and start a new life. Doesn't work. Even if you move to Thief River Falls, Minnesota, like the English IRS will still find you. But it is to run from the choice, to run from the mentality or the philosophy that it's going to be acceptable, that it's going to be okay. Instead, to be able to take steps towards being free of it, and to, whenever it is an option, not making it an option. As we talked last week and as we will talk next week, the reason that we get money is to be able to be radically generous with it. The reason that we have given it to us so that we can give it away. And if you ask someone to be generous who is hindered by debt, shackled by debt, it's like asking a bound person to sprint. They can't. And we need to take care of this debt thing first. So I want to talk first of all to the young ones in the room. These are the people who are starting out life, and these are the people who currently don't have any debt. If you're a younger person, you don't have debt, and you're thinking about the next stage of life, would you put your hand up, please? If you're free of debt right now. Congratulations, you jerks. That's not what I meant to say. Now for you, you will constantly be faced with this option and this choice. You get to go into debt if you want. You will advance, you will get things, it's free money. There are people in this room, the rest of the room, that would plead with you not to do that. Plead not to be bound up by the things that are going to have you for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, paying student loans and paying car payments and credit card payments and house payments, but instead to wait and find paths. If you are one of those individuals that know how much debt sucks, will you tell people that it sucks? Would you be willing to let them know that you made a bad choice and that you wouldn't do it again? If you would, I want you to shout real loud with me. Don't do it. Ready? Don't do it. There you go. Did you hear him? Good. But we can teach our kids and we can teach in our schools that that's not a good thing. It's not an option. It's something that's going to hinder the rest of your life. Now, for the rest of us, we're in it. We're in it and we owe somewhere in the region of $137,000. We are going to decide the future of our nation and our churches and our families when it comes to debt by how we now approach it. How now we are going to decide to use our money, to use our decisions to either accept this new norm or to reject it outright and fight it. And not just run from it, but turn around and attack it and chew it and grind it out until it's gone because it's not supposed to be there. Now, there is no magic wand when it comes to debt. As with a lot of our mistakes, when we've been doing it for years, it'll take years to get out. But something that we do here at Epiphany Station is we believe in having financial freedom, in being able to be free of debt. And what we recently ran was our Financial Peace University, which is a debt-releasing, budgeting, earning, spending, investing, saving plan that ran for 10 weeks, and 50 people signed up for it, and 30 people finished it out. If you were part of Financial Peace University this time around, would you stand up for me, please? If you're with us and you were part of Financial Peace, would you give these people a round of applause, please? Thank you. We celebrate that here because FPU sucks. It is so difficult to sit there week after week after week with your money open, your books open, and say, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something different. I want to be free from debt. I want to budget. I want to earn. I want to save. I want to give. And it's hard to get through it. And these people went through it. We will lead these. We will host these as often as there is people waiting for it. People wanting to be free of debt, people who want to be able to be financially free and be able to live their lives generously. This is a jar full to the brim with cut-up credit cards. It belongs to a couple in our church, Dave and Kelly Kruger, who are our Celebrate Recovery coaches, because they decided to own the fact that they're in debt and not want to be anymore. And they've taken the steps and they've gone all the way through and they're now on a road to being debt-free. We celebrate that. We celebrate decisions to do life differently because debt affects our ability to love God. It affects our ability to love people. If you're interested in being debt-free, in changing the way you do money, would you let us know and ask for help? We have these connection cards. They're on stands and they're on the red boxes that you can take and you can fill out and you can let us know you want help. You would like someone either just to talk to one time, or Financial Peace University is something you like to go through in the near future. Fill one of these out and drop it in one of the red boxes as you leave. There are two types of people, and there will always be two types of people when it comes to money, to debt, to giving. Those who accept the common way of doing it, and those who reject that. That there is a better way, that money can be leveraged for good, that debt can be avoided, that we can wait and trust on God for Him to open a path that doesn't mean subjugation and mastery, that we can flee and run from debt. But you see, this whole thing would be easy if money wasn't so dang important. If money wasn't so invasive, if we could just compartmentalize it and just keep it over here, that'd be great. But it doesn't. It gets into everything. It gets into how we think and how we eat and where we live and how we educate and how we dress. Money is important. It will always be important. It's here to stay. We can't get rid of it. All we can choose to do is change how we view it. And to view it in a way that has great potential for us to use it to love God, to give offering, to give tithing, to give blessing. Use it to love people, to save and to protect and to guide. Our lives are supposed to mean more than paying something down. We're built for more love. We're built for more freedom. We're built for the capacity to use every resource to love God and to love people. I want to challenge you, and I want to challenge our church to take a stand when it comes to money, when it comes to debt, and say it's no longer acceptable. In fact, what I want to invite you to do, if you're willing to take that stand, I want you to physically stand with me now as I close this in prayer. If you want to stand up with me and pray, take to your feet. Take to your feet and pray with me and pray for us and pray for our communities and pray for our churches that we would not allow debt to become the new normal. Father God, we want to trust you. We want to trust you, and this debt thing is a problem. It's a hindrance and it's a roadblock, and it just needs to die. So help us to kill it. Help us to kill it first by changing in our hearts and in our minds the perception that it's okay, that it's a necessary evil, that it's just something that needs to be done in this day and age. And instead, challenge us to live differently, challenge us to live with less, challenge us to not advance as quickly through life on another person's dime. God, we ask that you would call us to be different, to live different, to love different, so that we could actually flourish in those things, in these true goals of loving you and loving people. God, we ask you to kill debt in our lives, in our churches, in our nation. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.